Let's turn today to Luke's Gospel, chapter 16, and verse 1. Now Jesus was also saying to the disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward, and this steward was reported to him as squandering his possessions. And he called him and said to him, What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward. And the steward said to himself, What shall I do, since my master is taking the stewardship away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig, I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I shall do, so that when I'm removed from the stewardship, they will receive me into their homes. And he summoned each one of his master's debtors and began saying to the first, How much do you owe my master? And he said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, Take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. And he said to another, How much do you owe? And he said, 100 measures of wheat. He said, Take your bill and write 80. And his master praised the unrighteous steward because he had acted shrewdly, for the sons of this age are more shrewd in relation to their own kind than the sons of light. And I say to you, make friends for yourself by means of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when it fails, they may receive you into eternal dwellings. What is the point of this parable? Here is a parable in which Jesus was trying to teach his disciples to be wise in relation to the things of eternity in exactly the same way as earthly people are wise in relation to the things of time. In the last part of verse 8, Jesus said, The sons of this age are more shrewd in their relation to their own kind than the sons of light, or their own generation. Or we could paraphrase it by saying that worldly people are very shrewd in relation to earthly things and material possessions and the things of time, compared to the children of God, who are not so wise in relation to eternal things and the things of heaven. And when we see that as the point of this parable, we can understand it. What was he saying here? There was a rich man who had a steward, and the steward was unfaithful. Had been reported anyway as squandering his possessions. Perhaps not unfaithful, but just wasteful. And so the manager called the steward and said to him, Give an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward. I'm going to sack you. And the steward said to himself, What shall I do? My master is taking this stewardship away from me. I'm losing my job. I'm not strong enough to dig. I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do, he said, so that when I'm removed from the stewardship, others will receive me into their homes. And what did he do? He made friends with other people through the power and resources that he had at that time, so that when he lost this power and those resources, those friends that he had made would help him in future, would receive him into their homes. And so he called his master's debtors and he reduced their debt. It was unrighteous, but he did it. He said to one of them, How much do you owe? The man said, 100 measures of oil. He said, Take your bill and write 50. And he asked another person, How much do you owe? He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said, Take your bill and write 80. And obviously he did this so that he could make friends with these people by reducing their debt, by giving them, as it were, a gift of money from his resources, so that he would have a place to go after he'd been sacked from his job. And the master, when he heard about this, he praised him for his shrewdness for the future, not for his unrighteousness or unfaithfulness. Certainly there was no praise for that. But he said, You've acted shrewdly. And then Jesus said, verse 9, Now I say to you, make friends for yourselves by the means of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal dwellings. Now we see one thing here, that Jesus called money and material things the mammon of unrighteousness. It's not the wealth of righteousness, it's the wealth of unrighteousness. It is, as it were, all money, as it were, is dirty. It always soils our hands in one way or the other. We need to cleanse ourselves constantly. Even if we have earned it properly, there is a way in which money has a way of defiling us. That's why we need to always be detached from money. And Jesus said, make friends for yourselves by means of the mammon of unrighteousness. In other words, we are to use the money we have now to make friends for eternity, so that when it fails, that is, when this earthly wealth fails, those friends whom you have made through the use of money here on earth, will receive you into eternal dwelling places in heaven. The meaning is that just like this steward, during the time of his stewardship in that rich man's house, used his money to make friends for the future, the point here is that we also are now living on earth for a short time, and we must use our money during this time that we are here. Before, like the steward was sacked from his job, we're going to be, as it were, sacked from this earth. We're going to die. We're going to leave this world. Before we leave this world, we must do one thing like the steward, and that is make friends for the future. Not with unrighteousness, but this principle of making friends for the future by the use of money. How can we do that? If I use my money only for myself, to enjoy myself, I have made no friends for eternity. Even if I have given gifts to others and shown hospitality to others, I may not have made friends for eternity. But if I have used my money for the spread of the gospel, to bring people to Christ, to build them up in the faith, to encourage them, if I've used my home and hospitality and all the gifts God has given me for blessing others so that they find a place in God's kingdom, for the spread of the gospel in the world, and as a result of the money that I have given, maybe some tracts were printed, maybe some tapes were distributed, maybe somebody went out with the gospel and somebody was converted. I have a share in that. That person who was converted and found a place in eternity will one day welcome me when I get to heaven and will say to me, it was your money that brought me into the kingdom. That is the meaning of this verse. Use your money to make friends for eternity. Use your money to bring people to Christ instead of selfishly spending it on yourself. Make friends for yourself by means of the mammon of unrighteousness, so that when it fails, they, that is those who have been converted, through your money being used for the spread of the gospel, will receive you when you get into heaven at the end of life. I wonder how many believers there are who have taken this exhortation of Jesus seriously, who have said, Lord, I want to use all, not only money, but all earthly things that you've given me, my house, the vehicles you've given me, the property you've given me, everything for the spread of the gospel, so that people will find a place in your kingdom. Those are the people who are using their money in the wisest possible way. And then Jesus went on to say, he who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much. But he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is unrighteous also in much. In the context, Jesus says money is a very little thing. Satan and the world say money is a very big thing. Jesus says it's a very little thing. Be faithful in it. Then only can you be faithful in bigger things concerning spiritual wealth. Also, he says, if you have not been faithful, verse 11, in the use of unrighteous mammon. Again, he calls mammon as unrighteous. In dirty money, he says, if you have not been faithful in the use of money God has given you, how can you be entrusted with the true riches of eternity? The true riches are not what we use on earth. What we use on earth, we may think it's true wealth. It's not true wealth. Have you seen children playing the game of Monopoly with paper money? And you know that as an adult that is not real money. But the children will fight for it in that game. And when the angels from heaven look at us fighting for earthly wealth, they feel so sorry and surprised that people who call themselves believers don't realize that this is not real wealth. This is just a game that's going to be over. And God is testing us through the money He gives us on earth, however much you may earn, to see whether you can be entrusted with eternal spiritual wealth. And this is why many believers are poor spiritually, because they are not faithful with material things. They may be righteous, they may not cheat anybody, but they use everything for themselves. They live for themselves, they live for their job, for their profession, for advancement in the world, and the result is that they remain spiritually poor. But the one who sees that all this is worth nothing, gives it all up to God, becomes spiritually rich. Another expression which teaches what money is, he says in verse 12, is if you have not been faithful in the use of that which is another's. Money is another's. It belongs to God. It doesn't belong to us. It's God's. And if I've not been faithful in the use of that which is another's, how can I be given that which is my own? My own is that which I shall have for all eternity from God. No one can serve two masters. That is impossible. Either he will hate the one and love the other, verse 13, or else he will hold to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. There are only two masters. And it is faithfulness in the use of material things, recognizing that this is a little thing, recognizing that this belongs to another, and being faithful in the use of whatever we have, that determines how rich we are going to be spiritually and how much God can entrust to us. God wants many of us to be spiritually wealthy, and He cannot make us spiritually wealthy unless He tests us first with material wealth. May we pass the test.